In 1893, the British Empire extended throughout the world, and it enacted its authority through the mightiest navy in human history. HMS Victoria was the most powerful battleship of the time, and the British flagship was meant to attest to the world the maritime supremacy of the Royal Navy. Unfortunately, the ship became the greatest blunder in British naval history and a cause for abysmal humiliation for the British Empire. A foolish miscalculation during a demonstration in Tripoli, Syria, caused HMS Victoria to be violently rammed by another battleship. The enormously expensive HMS Victoria was damaged beyond repair, and it quickly began to sink. The scene became utter chaos, as the many other battleships performing on the show had to swiftly stop before they too would crash into each other. Some of them came less than 100 feet from the ships that collided. The catastrophe occurred before a large crowd. However, neither the spectators nor the sailors from other ships could do much as the sea furiously swallowed HMS Victoria. As the water rushed the burning boilers, a series of massive explosions shuddered the seas around the sinking ship. Rescue operations, although immediately deployed, were extremely limited due to the unfavorable conditions. Due to human error and one man's arrogance, almost 400 crew members were lost during the dire event. The aftermath set off an unprecedented series of protests, riots, investigations, and a court-martial. Everyone wanted to know what really had happened that day, and who was to blame for the fatal and embarrassing collision, but the answers only brought more outrage. A true flagship. HMS Victoria was designed at a time of swift modernization in ship construction. Her name was initially meant to be HMS Renown, but it was changed to Victoria when it was still under construction to celebrate Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee, which took place in the year the ship was launched. Her debut was accompanied by significant public interest. She was the largest, fastest, and most powerful ironclad in the world. A true flagship to spearhead the mightiest naval force on the planet. The ship was armed with a powerful 413mm cannon, the most massive gun mounted onto a battleship. And as if that weren't enough, HMS Victoria was the only vessel in the world to have two of them on board. To propel such a huge structure, a system of triple expansion steam engines was installed. The enormous engine array had cylinders up to 96 inches in diameter to output more than 12,000 horsepower. A unique steam turbine was fitted within the system to run a dynamo and provide electricity for the entire ship. It was also the first time a steam-powered dynamo was used in a Royal Navy battleship. The Navy was so proud of its mighty flagship that two high-detail models were created, one for the Royal Navy Exhibition of 1892 and the other as a gift for Queen Victoria herself. Its numerous features made it the most impressive warship on the planet, but this didn't mean HMS Victoria was flawless. Despite the ship's many state-of-the-art features, compromises in the design meant that she proved less than successful in service. The ship had an awful tendency for her foredeck to vanish from view, even in calm waters. The peculiar forward sinking was due to the massive guns mounted in the front. While the bow sank, the back section protruded due to its tail structure, which gave the ship a rather curious appearance and was nicknamed the Slipper by its sailors for its resemblance to the footwear. Meanwhile, achieving stability required another significant compromise. The immense weight of the forward turret, with its two guns, meant that it had to be fitted in a shallow position to maintain the balance and stability of the vessel. And in contrast with almost any other ship of her weight and size, HMS Victoria was the only one to have cannons in the back section. The result was a ship with overambitious firepower that could only shoot either to the sides or forwards. However, to recoil from firing in a frontal direction buckled the deck. An arrogant admiral. In hindsight, coupling an overambitious battleship with an overconfident admiral wasn't the most favorable idea. Still, at the time, Admiral Sir George Tryan's experience and tactical prowess seemed unmatched. Tryan carried himself with remarkable self-assurance, with almost half a century in the Royal Navy, and making his way from a sailor to a fleet's commander-in-chief. The Royal Navy is a particularly hierarchical institution, but Admiral Tryan took blind obedience to a draconian level. It said that his orders were law, and he did not take kindly to officers sharing their opinions when not prompted. As head of his fleet on board HMS Victoria, the flagship captain, Maurice Burke, was not allowed to make any decision independently without Tryan's consent. The Admiral wasn't by any means an incompetent man, and he'd performed several special operations during his long career in the Royal Navy. Tryon served with distinction in the Crimean War in 1855, and as an acting lieutenant, he commanded operations in the Black Sea before being posted in 1858 to the Queen's escort to Cherbourg. Sir George Tryon was considered an exceptionally intelligent mariner and an unparalleled tactician, so much so that he was assigned as a leader of innovation for the Royal Navy and was in charge of testing new and experimental ships and weapon systems. Tryon was also tasked with modernizing the Royal Navy's protocols and procedures on a tactical level, and came up with many strategic modifications to the signal book and manual of fleet evolutions used by every British captain. One of his main contributions was to make the fleet maneuvering protocols more straightforward by taking independence away from individual ship captains and making them follow the flagship's movements in a skeletal scheme. In his mind, this change in protocol would get rid of cumbersome communication procedures and make fleet maneuvering more organic. Ironically, on the day of Victoria's tragic accident, Tryon implemented many of the signaling maneuvers he had developed for vessel exercises. His blind faith in his own knowledge and ability, and his disdain of insubordination, set the stage for an inconceivable disaster. The day of the tragedy. As part of his responsibilities as Vice Admiral and Commander-in-Chief of the Royal Navy's Mediterranean Fleet, George Tryon was asked with touring the far reaches of the Empire and flexing the might of the Crown before all the British colonies. As the imposing fleet arrived off the coasts of Tripoli, a great crowd gathered on the bayside to watch Her Majesty's Navy perform the accustomed maneuvers. The 11 battleships and 3 cruisers comprising the fleet assembled into 2 columns separated by 1,000 yards. One column was led by the flagship HMS Victoria and the other by HMS Camperdown. At that moment, Admiral George Tryon ordered the 180-degree inward turn of both columns, with the objective to end up again with 2 columns of ships much closer to each other. Then, in what's considered an unbelievable lapse of judgment, Tryon gave the order to proceed with the turn, even when the 2 columns needed a minimal separation of 2,000 yards to avoid direct collision with one another. The order raised red flags among Victoria's captain and the navigation crew. The captain of the Camperdown initially stood still and disregarded the order. Nevertheless, the fleet commander's word was law, so he signaled to the young captain, quote, "What are you waiting for?" Tryon was confronted about the risk 3 more times, but the Admiral kept discarding what he considered feeble disobedience. The crew had its doubts, but they trusted the Admiral's experience and authority. The accident happened in what appeared to be slow motion, and it took 2 minutes from the start of the turning maneuver to the actual collision. It wasn't until 60 seconds before the crash that the crews and their commanders realized a fatal mistake had been made. The captain of HMS Victoria then asked Admiral Tryon several times for permission to order the engines backward, but Tryon kept silent and continued to watch in disbelief. Finally, he gave the order, quote, "Go astern, go astern." But it was too late. The momentum of the 2 battleships was impossible to stop, and Camperdown rammed into Victoria in a thunderous crash. Naval warfare during the late 1800s still utilized ramming tactics. Therefore, the front section of Camperdown was specially reinforced and equipped to pierce enemy ships. The damage was massive, and the continuous turning motions of both vessels increased the size of the perforation made to Victoria's hull. Having turned her engines astern, the Camperdown soon began to back away from Victoria, and as she withdrew from the orifice it had made, an unrestrained torrent of water immediately rushed inside the hull. Chaos ensued, and a responding team was immediately tasked with going down into the hull to close the compartment doors and prevent further flooding. Admiral George Tryon had been part of the team designing Victoria, and he knew of the compartment system that the vessel had to avoid complete flooding. He was confident the Victoria would not sink, and he even ordered the crew not to lower the lifeboats. Tryon planned to close the compartments and then move the ship into the coast to beach it, but as the responding team ventured down into the flooding chambers, they realized the task would be impossible. The time it took to close each compartment was too slow, and the hull was flooding excessively fast. The water had almost reached the heads of the sailors when they gave up on closing the compartment doors and fled for their lives. By this time, Victoria was visibly sinking, her heavy guns dragging the front of the ship underwater while her tail began to rise. Admiral Tryon was said to mumble, quote, "It was all my fault. It was all my fault." According to several accounts, the sinking happened in under 8 minutes, and the other ships were not able to lend help to the sinking Victoria immediately, as they were executing emergency maneuvers to avoid crashing into the 2 lead ships. When rescue efforts were deployed, only the ship's rear propellers were visible above water. In the end, 360 men lost their lives, including all those manning the engine rooms, unaware of what was going on outside. Admiral George Tryon had the chance to escape, but he decided to go down with the ship. A national scandal. Outrage quickly spread throughout the British Empire after the tragedy. The event was a humiliation for England and showed the genuine vulnerabilities its seemingly almighty navy had. A court-martial and several investigations into the incident took the public spotlight for several years, but the results were inconclusive. Without Admiral Tryon's first-hand account and presence, the guilty party could not be determined. Eventually, after realizing how susceptible a flagship could be to a low-speed ramming, the whole ordeal became part of a subsequent diminishing of the Royal Navy, and England's slow transition to investment in other branches of military combat. Thank you for watching our video. If you like exciting history-inspired videos, please subscribe to our Dark Documentaries channels, and don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss anything.